Long before the fall of Hyrule's monarchy or the rise of Calamity Ganon's corrupted machines, there was another war. According to ancient murals, the first Great Calamity happened 10,000 years before the events of Breath of the Wild. It set the template for everything that followed, a full-scale conflict between a technologically advanced Hyrule and a returning Ganon. Back then, Hyrule was at its peak. The Sheikah were not exiles or outcasts, but the kingdom's leading engineers and strategists. Their inventions powered cities, healed the sick, and, when needed, waged war. Anticipating Ganon's return, Hyrule's leadership approved the development of a massive automated defense system. The result was a military network of 4 divine beasts, large, animal-shaped war machines, and hundreds of semi-autonomous guardians built to patrol the land. When Ganon rose, this system worked. The champions, chosen warriors from the major races of Hyrule, piloted the divine beasts. Guardians flooded the battlefield, and with the aid of a princess, born with sealing powers, they defeated Ganon and locked him away. This was not a narrow victory, it was a rout. But that win had consequences. The Sheikah, having designed the entire defense infrastructure, now held unprecedented influence. Their machines had saved the kingdom. Their technology surpassed anything the royal family or Hylian nobility could control. What began as gratitude quickly turned into paranoia. Some feared the Sheikah might rise beyond their station and take power for themselves. The response was political suppression. The Sheikah were ordered to shut down their creations and dismantle their advancements. Many obeyed. Others went into hiding, preserving what knowledge they could. Over generations, the Sheikah split into 2 factions. The loyalists faded into history, taking vows of secrecy and servitude. The dissenters eventually became the Yiga clan, traitors who would later align with Ganon himself. The divine beasts and guardians were buried. Ruins that once held critical infrastructure were left to decay. By the time Hyrule needed them again, the technology was ancient and much of the knowledge behind it had been lost. What remained was treated more like archaeology than strategy. No one alive fully understood how the machines worked. They only hoped the old plans would still function. This was the quiet tragedy of the first Calamity. Hyrule won the battle, but dismantled its ability to fight the next one. Fear of the Sheikah did more damage than Ganon's forces ever could. The victory became a liability, and it laid the groundwork for the disaster that followed 10,000 years later. In the world of Breath of the Wild, evidence of this era is everywhere. Buried guardians half submerged in the earth, broken shrines, abandoned Sheikah towers. The scars of the first Calamity didn't fade. They were paved over, forgotten, and eventually reawakened, this time under Ganon's control. The second Great Calamity didn't start with an attack, but with a plan. After rediscovering the ancient Sheikah war machines, Hyrule's royal family tried to replicate the success of the first Calamity. 4 champions were chosen to pilot the divine beasts. Guardians were unearthed and reactivated. Zelda began her training to awaken her sealing powers, and Link was appointed as her personal knight, chosen by the Master Sword itself. The strategy was simple: repeat what worked 10,000 years ago. But this time, it didn't work. Calamity Ganon returned suddenly, not as a man or beast, but as a swarm of malice. Instead of attacking openly, he appeared beneath Hyrule Castle and took control of the very machines meant to stop him. The Guardians turned on their operators. The divine beasts were hijacked. The champions, Mipha, Daruk, Urbosa, and Revali, were trapped and killed inside their beasts. Hyrule Castle fell within hours. This wasn't just a surprise attack, it was a complete inversion of the kingdom's defense plan. Ganon weaponized Hyrule's forgotten past. The Sheikah technology, misunderstood and poorly secured, became the greatest threat. The plan to stop Ganon ironically accelerated his takeover. Link fought until the end, but was overwhelmed. Zelda, now without her champions, carried him to safety. With the help of the Sheikah, they placed Link in the Shrine of Resurrection, a stasis chamber designed to heal fatal wounds over time. Zelda returned to the ruins of Hyrule Castle and, in a final act of desperation, managed to awaken her powers. She sealed Ganon inside the castle, trapping herself with him in a century-long stalemate. The world outside collapsed. Without central leadership or military power, the rest of Hyrule fractured. The divine beasts stood motionless in the distance, corrupted and dangerous. Guardians roamed freely, attacking anything on sight. Entire regions became no-go zones. Villages shrank into outposts. The Sheikah, already fractured, became divided again. Some retreated to isolation. Others, like the Yiga clan, pledged loyalty to Ganon, seeing him as the inevitable victor. The psychological damage was just as severe. Survivors grew up in the ruins of a lost age, surrounded by monsters, unstable technology, and constant danger. Ancient texts became prophecy. The idea of defeating Ganon shifted from a military operation to a legend passed down by survivors. 100 years later, people didn't remember how the war was fought, only that it was lost. When Link awakens at the start of Breath of the Wild, he enters a world shaped by absence. No royal court, no organized resistance, just a handful of survivors, scattered memories, and the lingering presence of Ganon, still locked inside the ruins of Hyrule Castle, still growing in power. This was the cost of failure. Not just the fall of a kingdom, but the loss of knowledge, unity, and direction. The second calamity didn't just change the world, it erased the idea of what Hyrule used to be. Hyrule isn't just plagued by disasters, it's trapped in a loop. The Great Calamity isn't a fluke or natural disaster. It's the latest chapter in a repeating cycle of collapse driven by the same entity, reborn in different forms, across countless generations. To understand why the calamity keeps happening, we have to look deeper into the mythology that Breath of the Wild doesn't fully explain, but heavily implies. At the center of this cycle is Ganon, more specifically, the curse that created him. In Skyward Sword, the earliest game in the timeline, we learn about Demise, an ancient demon king who was defeated by the first incarnation of Zelda and the original wielder of the Master Sword. Upon his defeat, Demise cast a curse. His hatred would be reborn, over and over, taking different forms to haunt the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero. That curse is the root of Ganon's existence. Over time, Ganon shifts. He begins as Ganondorf, a Gerudo king consumed by ambition, but eventually he sheds his human form entirely. What remains is a mass of hatred with no clear identity, only purpose, destruction, and dominance. By the time of the Great Calamity, Ganon has become a pure manifestation of that original curse. He no longer needs followers, armies, or even strategy. He simply appears, corrupts, and consumes. This explains why Hyrule's victories are always temporary. Sealing Ganon doesn't break the curse. Killing him doesn't end the cycle. Each generation faces the same enemy in a new form, often with less understanding of what came before. Institutional memory erodes. Records turn to legend. Technology is buried, then rediscovered, then misunderstood. And the cycle resets. The Sheikah, to their credit, understood this pattern. Their shrines, towers, and constructs aren't just weapons. They're infrastructure designed to survive collapses. Their entire civilization shifted toward long-term planning after the first calamity. But even they couldn't escape the political consequences. Fear of their power led to suppression. By the time Ganon returned, their tools were still intact, but their culture had fractured. Zelda's line is another constant in the cycle, born with sealing powers meant to hold Ganon at bay. Each one faces the same expectations, but their success depends entirely on whether the world around them is prepared, militarily, technologically, and politically. Most of the time, it isn't. The same goes for Link. The hero always returns, but not always in time. In Breath of the Wild, he fails. He's mortally wounded, placed in stasis, and awakens 100 years too late. His existence alone doesn't guarantee victory. This cycle, hero, princess, Ganon, keeps Hyrule locked in a loop of rebirth and ruin. The Great Calamity is just the most recent failure to break that loop, and unless something fundamentally changes, it won't be the last. After the second calamity, Hyrule couldn't rebuild, so it scattered. With the monarchy gone, the military destroyed, and its cities overrun by monsters and corrupted machines, the survivors had no choice but to retreat into isolation. The unified kingdom that once spanned across the map became a loose network of independent settlements, each adapting to the new reality in its own way. The Zora stayed close to their domain in the east, relying on their natural defenses and long memory. They preserved detailed records of the champions and their roles in the calamity, even constructing monuments to honor Mipha. Their culture remained intact, but inward-looking. They remember the past clearly, but hesitate to engage with the present. The Gorons fared better than most. Shielded by the volcanic region of Death Mountain, they adapted quickly. Their physical strength and environment helped them survive, and while their numbers seem reduced, they maintained a working society with leadership, trade, and structure. The Rito, once a rare offshoot of the Zora, evolved into an isolated skyfaring society in the northwest. They focus on survival through mobility and sharp defense, avoiding conflict unless provoked. Revali's death is still part of their collective memory, but it hasn't driven them to rebuild ties with other races. The Gerudo took a different route. Led by women and culturally distinct, they remained organized behind strong leadership. Urbosa's legacy lingers, but her connection to Zelda is viewed with reverence rather than allegiance. The Gerudo tolerate outsiders, but remain cautious. Their territory is self-governed and largely self-sufficient. Each of these groups continues to function, but none work together. The sense of a shared Hyrule is gone. Travel between regions is dangerous. Communication is limited. Even technology, once a unifying force, now causes fear. The ruins of the Sheikah's creations, shrines, towers, and malfunctioning guardians litter the landscape as reminders of both salvation and betrayal. The Sheikah themselves are split. One faction remains loyal to the old ideals, hiding in Kakariko, and maintaining the last remnants of their history. They assist Link, but do so cautiously. The other faction, the Yiga clan, fully defected. Disillusioned by their treatment after the first calamity, they embraced Ganon as a symbol of rebellion. They hunt the hero, disrupt what remains of the kingdom, and serve no master but chaos. What little remains of Hyrule's culture is fragmented. Traditions persist, but disconnected from a central narrative. The royal crest still exists, etched into ruins and armor, but it holds no practical authority. Zelda's name carries weight, but only in stories. Most civilians live day to day, farming, trading, or scavenging, surrounded by monsters and decay. This isn't post-war recovery, it's long-term adaptation. The calamity wasn't just a military defeat, it severed Hyrule's cultural continuity. With no clear government, no unified defense, and no shared history, the kingdom exists more as an idea than a reality. And even that idea is fading. By the time Breath of the Wild begins, the Great Calamity is already history. Ganon is sealed within the ruins of Hyrule Castle. The world around him has moved on, not in recovery, but in survival mode. Link awakens in the Shrine of Resurrection with no memory, no allies, and no kingdom to defend. His mission isn't to protect Hyrule, it's to rebuild the conditions needed for its survival. This process begins with reclaiming the divine beasts. Each one is still corrupted, its original pilot long dead. Inside, the spirits of the fallen champions remain, trapped and voiceless. Link must defeat the Blight Ganons occupying each machine, phantoms created from the malice that killed their pilots. Once freed, the champion spirits regain control of their beasts and prepare to strike at Hyrule Castle. Each reclaimed divine beast adds a layer of strength to Link's final approach. More importantly, they represent a return to unity. The champions came from 4 separate tribes, and their cooperation symbolized Hyrule at its strongest. Reawakening that alliance, even in ghostly form, is a step toward reforging the kingdom. Zelda, meanwhile, has held Ganon at bay for a century. Alone in the ruins of her family's castle, she's spent decades suppressing his power, using only her awakened sealing ability. Her endurance is what prevents Ganon from breaking free and consuming the world entirely. But her strength is failing. Time is running out. When Link finally confronts Calamity Ganon, he doesn't face a man, or even a coherent form. What remains is a mass of energy, raw hatred with only a vague shape, born from the wreckage of his stolen machines and corrupted beasts. The battle in the castle is brutal but contained. Once Ganon is defeated inside, his essence erupts into the open plains as Dark Beast Ganon, an overwhelming force of malice too large to exist within the castle walls. The final battle plays out in the open field. With Zelda's help, Link uses the Bow of Light to strike at Ganon's core. With each hit, Zelda regains control. In the end, it's not a sword or ancient machine that ends him. It's Zelda's sealing power, passed down through the royal line, completing a duty set in motion 10 millennia earlier. But even in victory, there's no celebration. The world remains broken. The machines are silent. The champions are gone. The divine beasts return to stillness. Zelda, freed from her role, is left to face the aftermath with Link. Tears of the Kingdom explains what follows. A new threat emerges beneath Hyrule Castle. Strange gloom infects the land. And once again, Link and Zelda are separated. Whatever peace their victory earned is temporary. The Great Calamity ends, but the cycle doesn't. Not yet.